Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. It won't let me put my video on.
Hold on. Does that allow you to now?
No.
Okay.
That must be a setting or something.
Greetings.
Hello, Nubian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Long time no see.
I know it's been a second. How's it going?
It's going well. Just in the throes of everything. It's a busy season.
I feel that. I know you must be just holding all the things.
All the things. All the things. Times 10.
I'm sending you all the love.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Your videos should now work.
All right. Yeah.
Love.
Get my printer out the picture.
Okay, so it's now 6 o'clock. We'll just wait another minute. I see folks are still coming on to the webinar, and we'll get started in about a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for our third webinar of our Black Mamas Bailout webinar series. We're really grateful that you all have joined us today. We're really excited for the continued support, the labor, and all the energy that we have surrounding the upcoming Black Mamas Day bailout. My name is Elaine Powerful. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the operations coordinator at the National Bailout. So just really quickly, some background information on NBO. National Bailout consists of 13 organizations across the country. It is a Black collective that came about in 2016 when Black organizers were in conversation around strategizing around what we can do together that is not necessarily going to be as powerful as individuals. And there's a particular focus on the bailout system as well and how that affects our communities. And so two main things came out of that conversation. One, let's educate our communities in a very comprehensive and holistic way. And what came of that is the Until Freedom Comes Toolkit, which can be found on our website. And I can link that in a little bit, as well as a transformative bail popular education curriculum that can be found on the N4BL website. And I'll also link that as well. And the second thing was doing bailouts. So collectively, folks decided to do the Black Mamas bailout, and that was really envisioned by Mary Hicks from Southern There's a New Ground. And it was really powerful because this has been something that folks have never seen in contemporary history. And so from there, the infrastructure for a national bailout develops. And so National Bailout had organizations who were down and dedicated to supporting the bailouts happening around the country. And to date, have built over 300 mamas and caretakers and folks, Black folks from over 20 jurisdictions, and have supported folks with different supportive services, which we'll get into a lot more today, in regards to housing and case management and rehab, and just have been educating folks with that curriculum and that toolkit. And so these bailouts are part of a very strategic tactic to learn about bailouts, to learn about bails and jails and just how systems work in different contexts, understanding that how bail shows up and operates works and looks very differently depending on where you are. So from that, National Bailout has three strategic priorities. The first one is bailout caregivers and Black mamas. That being recognizing that starting off as a really big Black bail fund, recognizing there wasn't a lot of capacity to be doing that all the time, all over the country. And so scaling back and being really strategic intention about the work that we're doing. So bailing out Black mamas and caregivers is one strategic priority. Another one is building a political community with mamas that we bail out. And this comes from the understanding that mamas, Black mamas that we're bailing out are the experts. And we are really intentional about building a community with them and providing leadership development. And that comes by way of the Free Black Mamas Fellowship that Janae from Gilda Papoose Collective in DC really envisioned and thought up. And it's a 12-week paid fellowship program. And Janae will be moving us through that a bit more in the webinar. And the third strategic priority is the thought leadership, aka love leadership. And just understanding that as Black folks, we are closest to the problem, so that means we are closest to the solution. And so with all that, we've been working on a big Black bill report as well. That will be coming out in August, and that talks about all the information that we've been collecting over the years of doing bailouts, what it's been like to do these bailouts, what lessons have we learned, what organizing tactics are really, really strong and powerful and are moving us towards our vision of ending money bail and pretrial detention. What are some policy recommendations and a supportive services assessment and more. So that's going to be coming out in August, so stay tuned for that. And so yeah, today we're going to be talking about supportive services. We will have our panelists, Dr. Nubian Sun from Center for Resilient Individuals, Families, and Communities. We'll have Marbury from Law for Black Lives. And we are hoping to have Radharisha from the Ordinary People Society, as well as Janae from the Gilda Papoose Collective join us as well to move us through what supportive services are, their importance, to provide a really useful checklist when scoping supportive services needed for our Black mamas and caretakers, and talking through that Free Black Mamas Fellowship. So we're really excited to dive in. But before that, I want to do really quickly some housekeeping. I want to provide y'all with more ways to be in community with us around Mama's Bailout Day. So first we have Southerners on New Ground every Sunday at 6 p.m. do a technical assistance call. And so if you're interested in that, I'm going to be putting that link to register and get more information to the chat box. Secondly, we have a messaging, communications, and visual materials toolkit for Black Mamas Bailout. And so if you email us at info@nationalbailout.org, again, that's info@nationalbailout.org, we can send and ask for that toolkit. We can go ahead and send that along to you. And with our Black Mamas, Free Black Mamas webinar series, we have had 2 webinars so far, and we will have 4 more following this one. And so if you would like to, if you happen to miss those webinars, we are able to send over those notes and those video recordings if you email us again at info@nationalbailout.org. And the webinars that we have coming up are next Wednesday, we'll have one around communications. The following one will be around advocacy. The one after that will be around troubleshooting. Then we'll have a recap after all the bailouts have happened, just to go through what came up and what happened, just do a debrief. So with that, I will pass it off to Dr. Miriam, who will be grounding us in supportive services and talking about supportive services as a model for our vision.
All right, thank you all for hosting this forum this evening. I'm glad to be here to talk about a little bit about social services and the importance and how the Center for Resilient Individuals, Families, and Communities was born out of SOM and is a kindred organization of SOM. So it's important to think about supportive services because the jail is the main social services provider. And it goes hand in hand with the community. The community is already broken and fractured. So you have the community and folks are falling through the cracks. There are a lot of things structurally and culturally and legislatively that kind of hinder and kind of make it so our folks can fall through the cracks. And those things exist, I believe, due to just how we treat each other and how we feel about people who are poor, Black, and brown, who are not, the status quo. And also, social services is important, knowing that the community is existingly struggling, and cages are not the answer. We have to be careful to think strategically about how we want to construct social services, who we want to politic with around networking and building our infrastructure. That means in-house with other community organizers, and that means also existing community members. And a lot of places, especially across the South, have been or continue to be funded by private prisons. So, and it's a growing trend, even with local jails having the contracts with ICE. And it's a growing trend with for-profits opening treatment centers and also halfway houses and all of those things. So just being aware of the current status of our communities, who's doing what the history is, what are the, shortcomings of the communities where we live. And we have to be careful not to bail out, folks from one prison to another. When we know that our communities are shaky and hanging on by a thread. And so that's where the supportive and creative social services come through. It's a grassroots tactic that is visioned by folks who show up today and folks who have been in this realm of work called reentry or pre-entry for a long time. So it's a collective of people that keeps on growing to try to navigate, formal and informal tactics and suggestions and how to keep our folks free and how to get our folks what they need and how to trust our folks, because a lot of us individually and organizationally do not trust the people that we work with and for and by. And that looks like, telling people what they need or assuming what people need instead of asking. And that brings in the piece about the assessment. And when we got started in 2017, I was called in to hold down the social services stabilization piece. And this upcoming year, that piece has transitioned into an organization, the Center for Resilient Individuals, Families, and Communities. And we are a regional organization operating through the South, centering the needs and the voices of folks directly impacted by incarceration. And the way we center that is by abolitionist tactics. So in addition to this social services stabilization piece, we are finishing a 12-week paid community organizing apprenticeship where 14 of our mamas, and I mean mamas as in a spectrum of mamahood. We got Black trans folks, we got, single moms, moms who, took in children, moms who, all the whole spectrum of mothering. And so we have 14 mamas who are housed at different agencies and groups across the South, and we're just about at the end. We're a week away, and we got together in December. A group of folks got together and envisioned how this apprenticeship was to go from MBO, Movement for Black Lives Memphis, song. Some mamas from Philadelphia Bail Fund, some mamas previously bailed out through song and case management, and some other important folks to the conversation. And so got together, envisioned it, and it went, so we're happy about that, coming to a close and getting ready to join Gilda Papoose and NBO on the next fellowship. So that was the vision, that social services, we want our folks out and we want our folks well. It's not, sometimes there, in doing this, there is a hyper activity around, let's get them out. And then, that doesn't help folks at all. Where are they going to? Where are folks going? Where, somebody maybe, not have their insulin, not, the person that they thought they could stay with before they came to jail, and they can't stay with them anymore. And one of the main things that we deal with in support of social services is housing. On a baseline, it's difficult, especially in the areas where we work, but nationally and internationally, housing is an issue. And coupled with gentrification and folks being pushed out, and the Section 8 rolls being outstanding, all of those things affect, in our communities being broken, and all kinds of things that we are faced with. The rent is too high and the paychecks aren't enough. And unfortunately, hard work doesn't equate success. We have mamas, some of our mamas working 2 and 3 jobs, and it's still not enough. And are getting social service, are getting food stamps and stuff, and it's not enough. And the homeless shelters and the transitional programs are busting at the seams. And so we just have to think about this assessment particularly. And the model is built around the case manager going into the jail. And sometimes some places they won't let anyone but clergy or maybe someone with a legal background in. So a lot of our folks have become clergy in order to go in and do the assessments. So the model is built around going into, assess the needs, but also build rapport and relationship build. Because yes, we want our mamas out. We want them, supported in a community that's hanging on with threads. And we want our mamas to amplify, and hang on what they say the best practices are, what they say the vision is for their neighborhood, what they dream about, what they feel is the way forward based on their lived experiences. And so that's being done by the apprenticeships and the fellowships, looping mamas into political education, to what's transformative bail, how to do a one-on-one, how to do a door-to-door. All those things are important in skilling up the Black mamas we have, and just sort of wrapping folks, spreading resources out, wrapping folks in care, and finding those resources to pay mamas, to support mamas. The fellowships we've been doing have an emergency fund and some emergency case management. And throughout these 12 weeks, we've used about maybe 7 mamas have received social services. And we exceeded the social services support budget, which I knew we would, because it's just that, there's just not enough. On the baseline, we deal with some pretty harsh realities with utilities, with jobs, trying to, being alone and trying to not having enough support, and trying to, have your children, have a job, have a peace of mind, all those things, trying to balance and trying to stay out of the cages, trying to keep your children safe, all those things, and balancing. And that's what case management is able to do, is able to be a partner in that walk. I don't like to use the word empowerment. I would say, just amplifying their voice and their experiences, being able to troubleshoot things. Because a lot of times in crisis, we can't think, what next? A lot of times we can think what not next, but those case managers are there to walk the mamas through. And we have a 90-day stabilization program that starts with the assessment, and the case managers are doing 1 hour a week and wrapping them around, existing services and creative services. And also the mamas are being looped in, not only things through song and folks across the South, but other places to do work and to learn some skills that they want to learn, to be able to speak out, that they want to be able to do, like have a town hall about why, there's no grocery store for 10 miles, or why, the same street lights that have been out for 3 years, just different things. And it's been pretty amazing. Watching, we had a rough start with social services and the bailouts, and I'm just optimistic and looking forward to the growth. And in community organizing, we're committing to struggle, to find out, to evaluate, to say, take this off the table, this didn't work, and say, okay, put this on, this does work. So it's a commitment, and we're in it to win it, and keep our folks free, and help enhance the skills. So folks, folks, like you said earlier, folks know best how to address and meet the needs of the folks. And we have to trust, like we say, trust Black women. That is the truth. We have to trust, and folks generally. We have to trust folks. And trust that they know best about, their situation and where to find help and how to move through. It's just that case management piece is that partner in it, is that mentoring, is that amplification, is that, the day that there's not enough money for the bill and the baby has run out of the inhaler, your car is on E, and you know, the refrigerator's empty. And so on those days, particularly, our case managers can step in and be that person and say, you know, it's hard now, but let's think about what we can do. What skills do you already have? What resources do you already have? You know, how have you been in this situation before? How are we going to get through this? You know, what's the next step? What's the best thing? So that's the importance of the case management piece. And the case management piece was chosen because of not only what research has said, what folks have said what works, who have been directly impacted. And we know also that as we talk about social workers, you know, folks who are case managers don't have to be social workers. They can be, you know, folks from wherever who have qualifications to be able to sustain mamas through this work. You know, social work is a profession, and case managers case management is a position. The vision around this case management is that this case manager is, you know, going through the assessment, you know, making goals out and following up on those goals through those home visits, and is doing all those things. And they're sort of amplifying that direct services is a tool for liberation. You know, being directly involved with folks and doing these apprenticeships, these, you know, fellowships, all these things. And it's a strategy that, okay, our mamas are going to be out. We're going to move through the stabilization program, connect. And if they don't want to be in the fellowship, you know, connect to some other things that they want to do. Some of our mamas that came through the first fellowship with Gilda Papoose and MBO, and where the mamas did political education and went to Oklahoma for the National Council on Formerly and Currently Incarcerated Women and Girls. Some of those folks, you know, shows, you know, oh, you know, I'm not in the community organizing, but I like to do hair, and I'm gonna think about, you know, getting my license and what that looks like. But from this experience, I'll never look at things the same. My conversations have changed. My ideas about my place and my self-efficacy is enhanced because I see myself as a part of the solution and not so much as a part of the problem. You know, so those are some of the voices in a nutshell that have come out of the fellowships and things. And some ways you can connect with case managers or social workers, what have you. There are tons of schools of social work, departments of social work, departments of human services, sociology, psychology, you know, all those things, those places are good. You know, there's always students who are looking for employment. There's always, you know, professionals who are looking for employment. Also, beyond the school setting, professional boards like the National Association of Black Social Workers, which I've been a part of for a long time, National Association of Social Workers, Council on Social Work Education, all those folks, also human rights groups, Amnesty, you know, just reaching out to folks who have some type of alignment with our analysis about ending money bail and being free from fear. That's the main thing when you're reaching out to folks. Divinity schools, sociology, and stepping away from the professional you know, school arena, you know, folks, you know, that, you know, have been out and want to do something for somebody else that knows the ropes, knows, you know, how these things go, and is interested in stepping up in this way to case manage, you know. And a lot of our case managers have been existing organizers from SOM, and people in the community that have been a part of SOM for a while. So that's been a joy, skilling up our own folks to do things, and also, you know, just growing and learning with each step. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks so much, Dr. Nubian. I want to offer space for folks. That was so much information they just gave us, and I'm sure there's just a lot of processing that's happening with that. So I want to offer opportunity for folks to ask you questions if anyone has any right now. We'll also have space to ask a question at the end, but also just want to provide space right now if folks have any follow-up questions or thoughts around that. You can go ahead and write that in the chat, and we can say it out loud. Okay, so not seeing any questions come in, but if they do come in, we'll filter them towards the end when we have a little bit more time for thoughts and questions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I want to say one more thing. In the assessment, it's, you know, we have questions, set questions, very intentional questions. And it's about answering those questions and kind of preparing things. Sometimes, you know, things happen and you need a little more time. So the assessment is very important in finding what people say they need and what they need to have to be out and to be home in their communities with their babies.
We just had a question from Lori asking, are you looking for caseworkers only in the South? I know a Black organizer in the Midwest who would be great for this.
Currently, we're situated in the South, but I am not sure of who in the Midwest would be. You could send me an email and I can ask around if anyone is doing a bailout in that particular area and if they are looking for case managers. But currently it's in the South through the organizations that are working through SOM, Southern and Some New Ground.
Thank you. So I know you have to hop off, so we'll see you a little bit when you're able to come back and join us.
All right, thank you.
No problem. So we're gonna move into Marbury going more into supportive services and looking at the toolkit that I spoke about a little bit earlier, and walking us through this checklist that folks can be using to really think about how do we talk to the moms and caretakers that we're bailing out, and how do we assess what they really need. So I'll push it over to Marbury.
Thank you so much, Delane. And thank you everybody for joining. It's really exciting to have folks on these calls and be in conversation about how we can hone this practice and keep on building power. So I really appreciate it. I want to just start by saying I want to thank Nubian for her visionary leadership around this issue and really developing out and experimenting with different ways we can do this. I think very often we shy away from experimentation. And Nubian and Janae, who's also on the phone, happy birthday, Janae, have really been visionaries around this. And so I just am so grateful to be on this call with them and to be in relationship with them. So I'm going to take, as soon as this ambulance passes me by, I'm going to take about 10 or 15 minutes to just talk through really what's in the toolkit, which hopefully y'all have downloaded, the Until Freedom Comes toolkit. And we'll be looking at pages kind of 48 to 51 really. And this is the section that really dives into both a needs assessment model, kind of what are the questions we should be asking folks before we bail them out to make sure we can meet some of their needs, as well as a resource checklist. So how are we starting to think about and map the resources that already exist in our cities and towns, and how do we use those and partner with folks around those. And I think the rest of the call will be incredible. Folks can talk about their kind of experiences in trying to use these these checklists and trying to meet those needs. But I'll just kind of break down what's in the toolkit. So I want to just start with what Nubian already said, and I imagine folks on this call already know, which is that we see supportive services and the idea of providing both basic short-term as well as some longer-term support to the folks we bail out as important as the bailouts themselves. I think that this is, at least for me, for two key reasons. One is that we know that, as Nubian said, that our jails are full of folks who are inside of crisis. And this is, of course, because we have a system that decides to fund at levels that are like exponentially higher incarceration, surveillance, policing, and cages over basic services. And so the jails have become kind of the repositories for many of our people for times of crisis. And then secondly, I think also what we all know, which is that jail is really a damaging and violent place. And so folks come home with both immediate needs, but also with long-term emotional needs because of just the violence, the state violence that is our jails, and the emotional violence that comes out of that. And so we often talk about the need to assess, to map, and to think about both short-term and long-term resources. And so this might include everything in the short term, from how is a person getting home after you bail them out? Do they have food at their disposal? Are they food vulnerable? How can you support them? Do they have childcare? Where are their kids at? All those kind of questions around the immediate need for folks to get back into their lives and their home. And then longer term needs. You know, lots of the folks we bail out also have housing insecurity because of the rising cost of houses and gentrification in this country, and also job insecurity. And so how are we thinking about assessing needs in a way that allows us to both meet the short-term needs and connect folks to people and organizations that might be able to help them with the longer term needs. And then lastly, I think one of the key goals, or one of the goals that we have in supportive services is helping folks get back to court to resolve their cases. We know that this system is set up to keep folks in the system for as long as possible, to force them to plead. And so how do we make sure that folks are getting to their court dates, that they have any legal support they need, and they have the legal support to deal with the collateral consequences that come from the prosecution of our people through the criminal legal system. And the kind of other, I think, important point just to name before we jump into the actual toolkit is the importance of consent. And so this is true, and you'll hear this throughout the webinars, that it really is essential that you receive consent from folks before you bail them out. We've had folks who we bailed out who have shared with us after the fact that they want to go back because we can't actually provide them with the kind of 24-hour support they need or the medicine that they need. And so being really clear about that we are doing this for our people, and so talking to our people before we bail them out. And part of that conversation should include a conversation about like what are the needs that folks have when they come home. And so I'm going to share my screen, or maybe I'm not. Oh, yes, I am. Dope. So in the toolkit, we created a list of questions, and this again comes from the kind of experts on the phone. I see Pastor Glasgow is now on, and Janae, and folks who are doing this work every single day. And so these questions were taken and were kind of received from folks who are doing this work as well as social workers. And the idea of these questions is just an assessment of what are the needs of the people that you're bailing out. And so the questionnaire includes things like how long you've been in jail for, getting a sense of how long has their lives been disrupted by this incident. So what are the needs they might have? Are you employed? And if not, are you interested in having a job? And what types of jobs would you be interested in? Asking about if they have children, so a clear sense of whether or not they might need child support or child care support or things like that. Also asking if folks have housing. A lot of our folks have tended not to have places to go home to. Here in New York, it's like over 40% of women who get bailed out go home to a shelter. And so just asking folks about their housing situation. Asking if they have adequate transportation or if they need support with transportation. That's both in the short term, like do you have a ride home, but also do you have a ride to court dates, to service dates, all of those kinds of things. Do you have an attorney? And if so, what is their name? And if not, do you want a public defender or private attorney? And so what your plan is. Do you want to be bailed out? are you interested in us bailing you out? Can you commit to going to your court dates? Are you walking through any addictions? If so, are you getting help? And do you want help? And so again, this is a question around whether or not folks who are getting out might need some support around possible addiction. And again, if they want it. Do you have any mental health issues or other medical needs? Is there any medicine that you need? And so having, again, a clear sense of what folks might need from other services, from other organizations that maybe we cannot provide. And then what other resources do you think you will need help on once you're bailed out? So kind of getting a wider sense of what folks might need. And then do you have supportive family members or support system? And can you share the information with us? And this has been really important, I think, especially in long-term support of the folks we bail out, is also having a connect and a connection and relationship with the folks who are their community and their tribe. And so this is a questionnaire that we've asked people, if not this, then some variation of this, just so that we're making sure that we are assessing the needs of the folks we are bailing out. And that leads us to the next step, which is really around assessing your own organizational capacity needs. And so I think one thing that folks have found who have done these bailouts is just the level of labor, the level of emotional labor, the level of physical labor that's necessary to actually hold folks through this process. And I think that part of that is that many of us aren't trained in whether it's trauma support, whether it's addiction support, whether it's housing support, that these aren't things that we necessarily have training in or always the capacity organizationally to hold. And so I think a key question, I think that we've suggested that folks do, is really start to map the resources that exist in your city or county that could be bridges for folks who you're bailing out and can help you support them in some ways. And so we created kind of a checklist of different areas we think it's really important to explore what the services that are currently available in your city look like for each of these. And so these include transportation, again, both short-term and long-term. Many of our folks get people bus passes when they live in urban areas and arrange for ride and transportations if they live in less urban areas. Also healing services. And so as Nubian has said, and other folks will share, that this process of being incarcerated, of being targeted by the police, of living as a Black woman or femme in this country is an incredibly traumatic one that requires healing and support. And so what are the healing-based services, whether they're acupuncturists, whether they're counselors, whether they're social workers or restorative justice practitioners that you know of and can call into this process and ask for their support? We also ask folks to map trauma services. And so we know that over 80% of the folks who are locked up in women's facilities across the country have experienced either sexual or physical violence in the last 5 years from their incarceration. And so what are some of the trauma-based services, folks who you trust, who are sensitive, that you think might be helpful for folks in really mapping those out? We also suggest that folks map out addiction services and availability of those services. And so how easy is it to get in? What is the waiting list? Is it state-sponsored? Does Medicare cover it? All of those kind of questions. Also employment resources. We know a lot of folks' job opportunities are disrupted by forced incarceration. And so asking questions around, are there some job services or referral services that you can support people in connecting to that might make sense? And as Nubian said, in some cases, and Janae, in the DC area, folks have created those opportunities through fellowships for the mamas that they bailed out. Also identification. Do folks have a form of non-jail identification? And this is helpful with everything from getting services from the state to making sure folks can obtain entry into these different types of supportive services. And so just figuring out if folks have an ID, if they need an ID, and there's lots of ways to kind of walk folks through that process. Next, we talk about food. So making sure that folks have the money to have a secure food source. And if not, other local food banks or other resources you can connect them with, or can you organize around making sure that folks have access to food for themselves and their families. Also clothing. Do folks need specific kinds of clothing? Are there places where you can get clothing donated? Can that be part of your care package? So making sure that folks have the clothing they need. Also childcare. So we know again that over 80% of people who are locked up are mothers and caregivers. And so making sure that folks have the child support they need to either obtain the jobs, the housing, or the other opportunities, or just to make their court dates. Many courts don't allow children to come in. Also benefits. Does this person you're bailing out receive benefits? Are they eligible for benefits? Can you connect them with legal services or other folks who can help connect them to benefits? And what are the providers in your city who specialize in accessing benefits? And then this is something we often use for for the gift baskets, but also calling upon your community to donate and to throw down for this action. So I think one of the most magical things about Mama's Day and the Black Mama's Bailout is the way that people from all different sectors, from all different kind of walks, really do throw down and feel deeply connected to and deeply invested in making sure that our mamas get home. And so how can you hit up, whether it's clothing places or eating places or grocery stores or other types of businesses, to both ask about, can they provide opportunities for the mamas that we bail out and the caregivers, but also can they donate certificates or things like that, to make sure that the mamas come home in a way that really is showing all the love we want to show. So that's in the toolkit, kind of what we talk about in terms of supportive services. The things I want to just kind of emphasize before I sign off, number one is just that it's really important that we do assess the needs of the folks we bail out. And it's really important that we provide those needs in a way that doesn't restructure or recreate the kind of hierarchies and the punishment paradigms of the state. And so forcing folks into recovery, forcing folks into supportive services is by no means how we want to be moving. It's not our politics. And so instead, really figuring out what is it that people want, what are they articulating that they want, and how can we best meet those needs. And then secondly, it's just the real need to assess your own capacity, that this is an incredibly high stress and difficult and exhausting process. And so making sure that you don't bail out too many people, that if you bail out one person, you can support what that means for our organizing and for our work. And also that you are building capacity organizationally to hold this, and that you're getting whatever support you need as you kind of walk through this process with folks. And then lastly is just mapping what's available in your community and asking folks what already exists, what can you refer people to, who do people trust who do this work, and creating really a kind of a registry and a listing of that. And I think that's helpful not just for y'all and the folks who bail out, but also as kind of a lasting, I think, gift you can give to organizers and folks who you work with around what are the services, who do we trust, how do we build deep relationships with folks to really meet all the needs of our people. And then I think the other thing I just want to say is, the supportive services piece is not just a practical piece. I think for us, it's a deeply political piece. As folks may know, and as we often say, the National Bailout Collective is an abolitionist organization. And so we believe that these cages that our people are put into, these surveillance, these jails, these cops, don't keep our people safe. And we think that what we have to do is both dismantle those systems and dismantle their budgets, dismantle their policies, but also be building new systems. And so I think it's Rachel Halsing, who's an amazing abolitionist, who often says that abolition is more about what you build and less about what you destroy. And so I think this exercise and this experiment and this work we do around trying to figure out how we can actually meet the needs of our people when they're in crisis and when they're not, and how we bring people into this work, how we build power with the folks who we're in relationship with, is I think a political principle as well as a practical one. And I think the other thing that I'll just say is that one thing that we've learned, and Nubian talked a bit about this, is that, this is a lot of experimentation, right? And so we haven't lived in a world in which huge amounts of resources weren't dedicated to our oppression or to our caging or to our exploitation. And we haven't had the resources to create the systems we would want to create to hold harm and to hold crisis. And so all of these are experimentations and experiments that move us towards a different vision of how we deal with harm and how we deal with trauma. And so a huge piece of experimentation that is useful is documentation. So we really encourage folks to constantly be keeping an assessment and keeping track of how this work is going, what's gone well, what hasn't, to share numbers and data about what we're seeing and about what works and what's good for our people. And so I think that's really important. And that can be for you organizationally, for sure. And also we would love to share that with you. We're in that conversation constantly. And then I think the other thing is just as a collective, National Bailout is engaged in a process of developing a needs assessment model. And so moving away from risk assessments and instead thinking about how do we actually assess what our people need and then provide them with those needs and create infrastructure and systems that can do that. And so part of that is this idea of really moving resources, we call it invest, divest, away from prisons, away from incarceration, away from surveillance, and moving that towards supportive services and creating the infrastructure at the ground level to have community-led and community accountable supportive services that aren't punitive, that aren't about shame or punishment, but about holding our people and building powerful communities together. So I will stop there. That was a lot, but just to reference, it's 48 to 51 in the toolkit, which you can download on our website. So thank y'all.
Thanks, Marbury. I had a follow-up question I think also Pastor Glasgow can move into. And you're saying that this is a lot of experimentation. So this conversation around supportive services and doing this assessment for both folks who want to bail out as well as organizationally or collectively if we're doing the bailouts to determine if you will and can folks. I know it's not a clear cut of if you check up these 5 things then you shouldn't bail this person out. If you get to like 7, then you should. And so just how does that come up for you and Pastor Glasgow when we move into your conversation with TOPS as well in deciding and figuring out this is the best move to make for the mamas and for our capacity, and this isn't.
Ashe.
So I'm going to move it over to Pastor Glasgow to talk through just the Ordinary People's Society and just community-driven supportive services models that you all have used, and speaking specifically to the infrastructure in Alabama and the halfway houses that you all have set up and how you've just been able to connect folks to jobs and really build community with the mamas and folks that you bail out. Oop, hold on, you're muted. Can't hear you. Yeah, you're not muted, but can't hear you speaking. Nope. Let me try. Can I try now? No. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to Janae, and then potentially you might be able to call in with your phone instead of using video.
What's up, everybody? Hello.
Hey, Janae.
Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me?
Right there, yes.
Yeah, good evening. It's so cool that this is like a Zoom call because I actually can't see who all is on the call, so I feel like I'm talking to the universe. This is magic. I bet you this is how astronauts might have felt. Who knows? My name is Janae. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the creative director and the founder of Gilda Papoose Collective. Shout out to Nubian for speaking a little bit about our work and the fellowship that we did. And so I've led or helped to coordinate the last 2 bailouts years in DC. And this year our bailout is being coordinated by our collective member, Samantha Masters, while I take on the beautiful, generous task of helping to curate and create curriculum for our first national all year fellowship. It's not really all year. Last year we did a national fellowship program that was only for a month. And this year we're doing 2 national fellowship programs that are going to be in 6-week increments. The first 6 weeks as soon as we get out of the bailout, and then the second 6 weeks will start again in the fall. So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about the fellowship program and what we're thinking. So this year, we really wanted to pay attention to making sure that we were able to provide a container for folks to work on. Hi, friends. I came into a better room. Political education, and we really wanted folks to be able to last year we really focused on political education and folks getting rooted to what it's like to be a Black mama where they live. And now we're thinking about it in a more intentional way. And so one of the courses that the 12-week Labor of Love workshop that just ended, shout out to Nubian, had a class called Once Upon a Time, I Imagined Justice. And so we're going to take that same workshop and spread it out amongst 6 weeks. We're asking folks to think about what are things that they can do to help prevent harm within their communities, and what are things we can do to create avenues for people to get out of cages, and what do people need to be thriving. So these are our 3 core questions, but we'll most likely only do 2 in each cohort. And then the first cohort
is going to be from the week after the bailouts through the end of June. We'll take the month of July to assess as a team how it went, and then we'll start the next cohort in August, and that will go through the end of September. And then we will gather all the moms like we did last year into the National Council for Incarcerated Women and Girls, which this year is going to actually be in Alabama. And so this year, we're really looking forward to our sites across the country, bringing together mamas. And what we did last year is we had people have, some cities only had one mama participate in the local fellowship. The national fellowship that we did, that was smaller. We only had 22 people that year, last fall. But this year, what we're trying to do is that sites would apply with 3 mamas per site. And so that means that the mamas will get an opportunity, the people who are there, they won't necessarily just be people that we bailed out in 2019. There could be people that participated in bailouts in 2018 or 17, or they could be folks who've been impacted by cages in the same way or particular ways that line up with our framework as the National Bailout Collective. And people will be offered a part-time job at $15 an hour, 15 hours a week for 6 weeks. And this is just another way for us to get rooted in our healing justice practices and our organizing practices. So the first cohort, we're really trying to get folks who've already been bailed out involved, and folks who've already participated in our fellowship program before. And then the second bailout, after the month off, we're hoping to really get some of the mamas we get from this year. They'll have all their supportive services a lot. It'll almost be done with their first 90 days. And they'll hopefully be a little bit more secure and then be ready to take a deep dive into this fellowship with us. And we're really excited about that. And I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to learn together and to dive into theater as a forum for us to discuss the cycles of oppression, and to use theater to get creative about how do we imagine justice actually being tangible and something that we can achieve, an abolition we can achieve in our lifetime. If there's any questions.
Yeah, I want to ask a follow-up. So the Free Black Mamas Fellowship, you spoke about this a little bit already, but how are you connecting this to support services and making sure that people, once they get out, are being held and safe? How you connecting to
We're really excited because what is really great is that Nubian's son with CFIRC is already trained in the social work piece. And I know she talked a little bit about what it meant to have social workers and case managers earlier. So with her like livelihood and social work and my livelihood and healing justice and theater, we're combining our curriculums to serve in a way that the people who come in to participate in this program won't necessarily have to spend 15 hours doing theater. Like in Maryland, the option is that they're going to do court watching, and then they're going to do like court therapy, like not court therapy, but like one-on-ones with lawyers every week, and then another one-on-one every week with a case manager or a therapist. So that's part of their 15 hours. So we're really trying to create a container that adds efficiency to the already thought of stable services. Whereas before, I think what we've done in the last couple of years is like folks have like gone on their own somewhere and things like that. And this year, what we're doing that's different is we're making sure that folks within the fellowship can actually do the things they need, like contact their social worker, meet with the case manager, follow up on their case, know when their court dates are, get help on like creating a savings account, make sure their bills are in order. Our wraparound services also have provided in the past help for like bills, because we know people get laid off from work and like their bills stack up when they're in cages. So our wraparound services are going to be able to help support that. And then the fellowship will also be a space for people to talk about with each other their very particular circumstances that might not be happening to us. And I hope that explained a little bit about, we're trying to think of it in a combination. I'm just really excited, which is why I talk so much.
No, I love it and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was completely clear.
Okay.
Yeah. So I see we weren't possibly able to get Pastor Lasco to come on and have sound. And so with that, just want to offer a space for folks who have questions for our panelists who are on to ask questions. And I see one that I'll get to in a second. And yeah, just really thanks a lot for joining us for today's webinar. There are a few links that I'm going to be putting into the chat box as we're filling questions for folks and our panelists are answering. And if you have any follow-up questions that occur after this call, again, feel free to reach out directly to info@nationalbailout.org and we can connect you to the panelists, or we can field those questions ourselves. So yeah, so I want to offer space for folks to ask questions, and while folks are doing that, I'll add some links in regards to what some conversation has been around today.
And thank you, Nubian, for putting the website.
Yes. So I see a question from earlier from Elizabeth Epps asking, who do you credit for the quote around about abolition being more about what we build and less about what we destroy? And I think that, yeah, that was Marie who said that.
That's Rachel Halsey from Critical Resistance, which is amazing, and she's amazing.
Thank you, Marie. Are there any other questions? Thoughts? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions. So again, feel free to just follow up with us via email. We'll also be sending out notes and this webinar recording via email tomorrow. Okay, just another question just came in. Elizabeth Epps again. Any thoughts on transitioning back to bailouts from who we did a bailout then became a revolving fund? Okay. Can you reword that question? I'm not quite sure what it's asking. Got it. Okay, so the question is from Elizabeth. So we became a revolving bail fund after doing bailouts. How can we best use our current position to still do a meaningful bailout? Got it. Any thoughts from panelists?
I was gonna say, I think it's a really good question. I know that folks in St. Louis have been struggling with the same kind of question. They've been bailing out folks consistently for the last year and want to use Mama's Day, I think, specifically to highlight the impact, because they've been bailing out men and women and all sorts of folks, bailing out the impact, like naming the impact that bail has on Black mamas and Black caregivers. For them has been like a way to use Mama's Day to just elevate that work and to kind of bail out folks to tell that story. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's like one group I know who I think is in that position. But I don't know, Janae or Nubin, if y'all have thoughts.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I think that that's such a powerful question to even ask. Like what a gift it is that you all have become a revolving bail fund. Hello. And so I think that when this started 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, whenever it started, when Mary and I are really good friends, and we were just sitting around before this even really became like a thing, talking about how important it is for Black mothers to be with their children. And so I think that what you can amplify is wherever you are, how many children in a classroom would be without mothers if we didn't get them home that year, right? And like, what does it mean? And I think that we have to begin to think about like the absurdity, like, of you having to take you can't even take flowers inside a jail. And so if you wanted to go visit your mom, you couldn't even give her the flowers that you would like to give her. And so what is that image of like flowers outside of a cage? What does that look like to us? And what does that mean? If you can't even give her flowers, you can't give her a bunny. So, and actually in most prisons, you can't even write on colored paper. And so what does it mean that I can't even mail you a card, that I have to put on white sheets of paper that don't have, that have to have lines and can only use blue and black ink to write them a letter to even say Happy Mother's Day? And that what you all are trying to do is emphasize that for the last 600,000 years, women have only been the people who take care of women are women. And that's not to say like trans, that doesn't include trans and GNC people. And I think that this is a really big opportunity to emphasize the importance of like women coming to bat for women, for people of Black people to come to bat for Black people. And yeah, I went on a tangent, but emphasize.
Dr. Nubin, do you have anything to add to that question? Okay, thanks so much for that.
Especially, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, no, keep going, go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially if you think about the fact that there's a lot of mamas driving around here with licenses or without licenses to drop their kids off at school, who could then get pulled over with their children in the car if they make an illegal left turn, or if they don't use their signal, or if they don't wear their seatbelt. Like, that is legit happening for people who have to decide to pay a ticket or pay for their children to have lunch every day.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in addition, around using your position to do meaningful bailout, I think that the language and the messaging that folks use for their bailouts will look differently depending on who they're bailing out, what the current moment is, and what like the political analysis of the organization is. And so to do a meaningful bailout just means like, how do you be more explicit around your language that we are doing a Black mama's bailout, because Black women and caretakers, Black moms and caretakers are like disproportionately affected. Are there so many things that are set up that are keeping them in cages, and even if they're not specifically in cages, they're just keeping them from being able to access and have different types of supportive services available to them. So just being really explicit with language in your messaging, and how you're putting out the language around why your organization is taking this on in this current moment. And that being very different from how language and messaging may be for the other bailouts that you do.
I would even get specific to wonder if there's any Black trans women or Black GNC folks locked up in a cage that they shouldn't be in, right? And I wonder how you all can highlight some of the specific conditions happening in your area.
Definitely. Are there any other questions? I'll give it like 20 seconds just in case folks are typing. Okay, so again, thanks so much for everyone for joining. I think we'll send out again these notes in this video recording for folks who attended and folks who weren't able to attend, just to be able to follow up and listen again, as well as put a direct link to the toolkit. A lot of what folks had talked about already, and the images that Marbury had went through are from the toolkit, and so we'll put a direct link so folks can have easy access to that as well. So if there are no last thoughts from our panelists, we're going to close out, and hopefully we'll see you all next week, next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for our communications webinar.
Thank you, Delane.
Thank y'all.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.